and we're live. I've got a very good friend of mine backstage in the green room. It's a joy when all I have to say to someone is, "Right, are you good?" And he goes, "I think so." And I say, "Well, I take you out the stream, I introduce you, I bring you in, and then we talk shit." And he goes, "Yeah, that's cool." So that's what we're going to do tonight. I think that's what we do most nights on here. Oh, I can't wait to have this chat and introduce you to a really good friend of mine who I've known for a good number of years as well. I'm thinking about it today as I was writing my notes. So 2005, when I moved back home to Scotland from staying down in Reading, and I went to work at JP Morgan. And that 2005 is when I first met this evening's guest. We worked together there for a couple of years. After a couple of years, I left, but we stayed in touch, and we have done since then through mutual appreciation of rotten football, decent curry for the most part, music, a mainstay of many conversations that we've had, and whisky. Of which, if you aren't interested in any of them, just switch off tonight, because that will pretty much be the lot of it. I can't wait. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to High G's and to the JFDI podcast, Mr. Shaun Gauld. Good evening.
Evening all. How's things?
I am great. How are you?
Oh, living the dream. Living the dream. Great to be here.
Yes, well, thank you for coming on. I do put a little bit of effort into my intros. Was that okay for you?
The bit that worried me most in there is that you had some notes, and that worries me.
I always have notes.
I know, but I didn't think you'd actually prepare that well, or have dug something out the closet or something.
Well, I've done the former, but I would never do the latter. I don't know that there's anything to pull out the closet for you.
No,
I mean,
no, there's nothing. You can't dig anything up on me.
unless of course you've got some big news tonight.
No, the closet's just being renovated. That's all. The closet's definitely empty. The door is open. Skeletons are out. Loft conversions on the way. So there's nothing there.
Oh, brilliant. Well, we're going to talk about tunes predominantly. And I wasn't not surprised by your choice, but for the second time within just over a month, one of my previous guests chose the same band but a different song, and probably the most unlikely song amongst your choices. I'll let you guess at the end, once we've been through them, that somebody else who's been on the podcast chose the exact same song by the exact same band. And I do think you'll probably think it's the most unlikely. But then when you told me about when you'd asked your family what songs they would choose, and it wasn't until about 20 guesses in that they got the second band.
I don't think. Yeah, I think I went for, right, I'm going to do this with Graham. I'm going to do the show. I need to pick my top 5 songs. So you warned me how hard that was in the first place. And I thought, I can get top 5. So I've got a list of about 50 songs, one of which has predominantly stayed within that top 5 zone the whole time, and the rest have all come in and out, depending on what time I've been writing the list, what time of the day I've been writing the list. Sunday morning, Saturday night, after the gym, during whiskey night when something appears or whatever. But then I said to my wife and my kids, I said, I'm going to do this. What bands? I've got 5 songs, but what bands would I have it? And like you say, they must have gone through at least a dozen bands before one of them was actually in the top 5. And then when I actually said, right, here's my list, 4 of those are not things they'd have named. There's only one, which is probably an obvious one for them, but maybe not other people. But I tried to vary the theme as well. Otherwise, you could get very locked in on the theme. So I've got a broad taste.
It is a broad taste. I like it. But before, so I'm going to do something different with yourself tonight because uh, because I know how much you love music. And it's been great. Guests that come on, some are more right into music than others, and but people choose songs for different reasons. So I want to ask you a question before we go into the songs, but it's musical related. So I'm wondering what your earliest musical memory is.
Earliest musical memory, right? So, so I grew up in Hong Kong, right? So primary school age and so on, and I don't really remember music from there at all, right? So music didn't happen until like back in the UK, really, which is maybe a good thing because God only knows what the music was there. Now, I know like the first singles and things I've got are Slade singles, which
Yeah,
obviously I didn't buy because I didn't buy them at that age, right? But they were so Slade singles like "Come On Feel the Noise," all their misspelling type things were
yeah,
the first things I had on my radiogram, which I'd bought out the sort of local paper sort of classified ads, and I mean the proper sideboard unit thing with long wave and ultra long wave, and you could tune into Russian radio stations and all the rest of it, and play 78s. So I had some Slade singles there, and then I think the first album I bought was probably like Queen's Greatest Hits or something, or an early version of that, around the 80s. But really, the 80s onwards, which is part of the theme that we'll see today.
yeah,
But the 80s onwards is where music really started and then went in both directions. So keeping up to date with what was music, but also going back, which you fortunately haven't pulled in tonight, but definitely the 80s. That's where the first music came in.
yeah.
Before that, I think it was all Sesame Street and American TV.
Right. Okay. So your first song is "Aces High" by Iron Maiden.
Yep. So
Straight in.
into the 80s. So yeah, first music. So like I say, it's maybe Queen, Slade, Queen. So a good bit of rock in there. But then really, when I really started getting into music and buying records, so sort of British metal scene, British rock was really where I am. So Aces High is more kind of the time when I'd been out starting going to gigs and things, rather than when I was specifically maybe just buying the stuff. And Maiden was one of these bands, so they're a real solid powerhouse from the UK. They were there right through my youth and college and so on. I think I went to see them in concert, a dozen times in various places, all in those days small venues, like the Edinburgh Playhouse being probably the biggest, which is
Yeah,
maybe 3,500 folk. So nowadays that's like a pub gig, you know. And they were one of these bands that kind of changed and grew. So they came out of the kind of post-punk scene, which I totally missed, and you would have missed the punk scene at your age, but the scene and you go back into that scene. So I think because I came through the 80s, which was sort of, if you like, new British big hair rock or new romantic type stuff was your sort of directions. And then coming through that, but then sort of looking back and going back into the punk scene. And that's where they really kind of originated from, because they probably started out pre-record deal as a out and out punk band, but then realized that wasn't actually that good and they could do something else and they came somewhere different. So
yeah.
yeah, that really kicked off the rock scene, off and running. Albums are behind. 70% of that is rock of the ages, from the 60s through to the current day.
Right. So you weren't ever tempted to get on board with the new romantic scene then, no?
I got the funny shirt and the big pants, but they didn't really suit me. So
So you stuck with rock.
dirty t-shirts and a leather jacket was much easier.
Yeah. Is there a gig? And you're saying that like you're starting to go to gigs at that point in time, like smaller ones. Is there a gig that sticks out? Might not even have been your favourite, but is there a gig throughout the years that sticks out as like really memorable for something? Wait for it, for something other than the music.
There's probably a few, right? So, in the Barrowland, so the Barrowland on its own, actually, virtually any gig at all in the Barrowland was just memorable,
Agreed.
right? The venue itself, the pub across the road, the bouncing floor, the flying pints of beer, and all the rest of it. But New Year's Eve gigs at the Barrowland were amazing. And Marillion in the 80s with Fish were a regular New Year's Eve Barrowland gig. And that was great. But the music was great. But yeah, the atmosphere of that was really some of the best. And there's no doubt about it. Other ones which might be memorable, more from the possibly the music, but then reminiscent. I went to see the Stranglers a few years ago now, so pre-lockdown certainly. So
Yeah.
maybe 2018, and it's one of the few bands that I've seen in their grandparent stage, if you like, right? So you've seen the Rolling Stones touring, you've seen Bruce Springsteen going, and these are old guys out still doing the same thing. And I've never really gone to see these guys because I thought they can't be as good as they were. So I think I'd be disappointed. Now I know folk have said that the boss is amazing. He's better now than he's ever been, and so on. But I did go to see the Stranglers, and that was just an amazing gig. It was in the O2 Academy or whatever it's called now in the Gorbals in Glasgow.
Yeah.
So it's quite a small type old bingo hall type place, and you're all on top of each other. But to see these guys who've been doing that for so long, and they still do the pub circuit as well as a kind of small gig thing. So they're all over the place, and that was just brilliant because it was like it was being there.
Yeah.
And most memorable for not the music was in King Tut's Wawa Hut. So Oasis came and played before they were Oasis. So the night they were discovered, I was in there watching them, and they were garbage. who the hell discovered them and thought they would be good? Because we came away going, that was rubbish. That's one of the worst gigs I've ever seen. Now, I can't remember it at all, other than, like 2 years later, they suddenly appeared and the story came that they were there. And I thought, I was there that night, and go back and look. And yeah. So was it who discovered them? Wasn't
Alan
Malcolm
McGee.
McCann, was it? Yeah.
Alan McGee.
So when he discovered them, he obviously saw something different from what, we just didn't see any attention to at all. It was just this really bad, not playing well, sound wasn't good, singer was a bit strange, and he was exactly like Liam is, right? It's not, that's just how it, but he saw something that he could take, tweak a tiny wee bit, and let it run. And that's the difference. I can listen to music, I like what I like, don't like the other stuff, but I can't do in with it. I don't play, I can't do in with that. I could tap a beat out, but so let somebody else, let the professionals do the job and play the music, find the music, develop it. I'll buy it.
I love that. So before we come on to the next song, because I'm curious because me and vinyl as well. I'm curious to hear from you about why vinyl still plays an important part in your life.
So obviously vinyl was the option then, or cassette. But cassettes are less tangible. So I never got into cassettes. I had a record player, which suddenly I got rid of the radiogram and bought a nice deck and stuff. And I think actually at one point bought a Marshall amplifier speaker like you see at gigs, which cranked out 100 watts and filled my window. So it was great when we had garden parties, so that was good. But that was a 1 to 11 type knob, but it never really went above 1.5 in the house. Didn't really work. But vinyl was the medium of choice, and all the way through. So once CDs came out, I started buying CDs, and then vinyl was harder to get. But CDs aren't the same. Right? I get the quality is a bit clearer and stuff, but I still like the sleeve notes, having the lyrics on a size that you can actually read, flipping the disc over, being able to choose a particular song as opposed to sitting with your remote control and going dim 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 and letting CDs run. Exactly, doing that. So the turntable is a manual turntable. When it finishes, I need to lift the needle up and take it back. Right? It's none of this automated stuff either. But then when I met my wife and we moved in together, and I emptied out all the stuff out of my mum and dad's house, all the vinyl came, but all the vinyl went in the loft because at that point, record player didn't have a place to go. And it was there for years. And anytime you went in, it was like, what are you going to do with this? We'll need to move it. I said, you can't get rid of vinyl. You need to keep vinyl. Kids came along, vinyl's still not down. The government started doing their free loft insulation, cavity wall insulation type thing. So we signed up for that, which meant you had to empty the loft. Now, if you go to empty a loft of vinyl, you can, roughly speaking, get that many records down from the loft in one go as you're lying on your stomach handing them down, right? And there's a good number of records. So we did that, and they came down and the kids were helping and saying, oh, what are these? And I'm like, oh, that's a record, that's music. What's music? Oh, how many songs are on that? I don't know, 10, maybe 12. But they're comparing it to a CD, which is a quarter of the size, and thinking it's going to be hundreds.
Yeah.
I loved the artwork. That was great on some of the stuff. But as we kept handing them down, again, what are you going to do with this? It's going to have to move. And I was like, no, it still stays. And then the loft was done and it all went back up the stairs again.
Yeah.
And then it was a good few years ago, I don't even know it was my birthday or whatever, but there was certainly a bit where I was gifted one of the little USB turntable type things. So a Bluetooth speaker, little USB turntable, and took out a record box worth of vinyl out the loft. And that really got me back into it again.
Yeah.
As soon as lockdown hit and I had to be in the house the whole time, all came down, quickly went on, found a cheap turntable, quickly upgraded that to a better turntable, started finding things like Bandcamp and all these other things to find new bands, you know, and that was it. So it's the tangible thing, and I still like it. And this is a very temporary setup I've got here because we're converting the loft and renovating. So
yeah,
if I move the camera around, there's boxes everywhere. But
the vinyl,
also it's the easiest way to store it. But it also means at work, whenever you see me join a Zoom call, I'm like that. Oh, hold on, take it back off again.
Just get a record off. So what was the last long player that you had on for your oral delight?
Today, actually, it was a band from very near you, actually, from Livingston, Bathgate area. A band called the Cosmic Trip Advisors.
Oh,
bluesy kind of rock stuff. You would probably like them. I tidied up as well.
right. I've not heard of them. I'm going to have to check them out.
Well, actually, it's going to be a potential gig night once they start touring again.
Oh, nice.
I can't actually see you.
I am down for any band called the Cosmic Trip Advisors.
Oh, hold on. My son has just worked out they were on the telly.
Oh, were they?
Well, that's it. So he's just come down with the phone saying, you're on telly.
Oh, you're on telly.
Yeah. Podcast.
Yes, you are. Oh, look, I don't normally do this, but I said tonight, because we're probably going to talk about this, aren't we?
We could.
This is one that you gave me.
Oh, anyway, is that the FMWS one?
Yeah. Anyway, before we do, we'll just get them around my nose. Your next song, we'll do that first. Because you mentioned the band, didn't you, earlier?
I did, which was coincidental more than anything. So Marillion, so still very much of this kind of rocky side. They came in as new progressive rock or whatever. And Fish as well, because he's just such a big personality. Certainly then, maybe a bit less so now. He had his own problems in life and all the rest of it, with sort of mental health and his marriage and all sorts of funny things. But the music they were putting out at the time was quite amazing. And some of them quite epic songs as well. So there's big stories behind them all. So a lot of very much storytelling. But the song here was a B-side song as well. So it's not even sometimes the more popular singles that have come out or their famous album tracks that you'll see from bands. So the song was Freaks, which was a B-side on Kayleigh or something off Shauns Childhood, I can't remember. And it always just kind of resonated because it was just him saying, we're all a bit different here, right? So everybody gets on with their lives and so on, but you can't see what's under the skin and everybody's a bit different. So this is mid-80s. This is probably like 1985, something that came out. So you're somewhere in your teens, finding your way through life, and just a bit different. I think the actual background of the song was he met like some bikers gang in a pub or something like that, but they'd all been injured in their life and broken legs, and half of them were in wheelchairs, and they just said all the best freaks are here, which is the kind of key lyric, and that's what it came. But then he's kind of taken that and grown it, and I think it just kind of sat home with me. You were different from everybody else. Not everybody else, but you were different. It's like you said, why didn't you go into this new romantics line, right?
Yeah.
Part of that was possibly image, I couldn't dress like that and done that. If you'd seen my hair in the 80s, yeah, it wouldn't have worked, right? And I think you've seen my student pictures, so
I've seen the pictures.
New romantic wasn't going to happen, right? But that was it, so just, when you were coming through that kind of time in your tail end of school, going into college and all the rest of it, every single person you knew was a different freak in one way or another. Visually, mentally, how they spoke, what music they liked, what they did at the weekend, doesn't matter. But everybody knew it was just a misfit or a freak in there. And that really kind of sat home with them.
Yeah.
Great other tracks, lots of political stuff, lots of strong messages and so on. But this was just this, everybody's the same under the skin, but get on with it and live your life and enjoy it.
Yeah, too right. That probably explains a lot about how we got on so well.
Yeah, I think between you and me and a couple other folk, there's definitely a mismatched society in there.
Absolutely. I know, but it works, right? It does. So I've got a question. You can take this any way you want. It's probably best going to fit here. So, well, it's kind of twofold, really. We're all freaks. We're all individual. We're all in our, different but the same in our own skin. What would, I'm not say you say, in fact, should we say you say? What would you say, Shaun Gauld, best and worst qualities?
For me?
Yeah.
My best and worst qualities, oh, God knows.
What would your wife say?
Probably something totally different. Snoring. Snoring would be the worst one, clearly.
What would be the worst?
Snoring.
Snoring.
That would definitely be the worst one. Best and worst, right? So I think I'm quite an honest kind of person. So I generally tell people what I think or how we think. And that might be good, be equally bad, right? So, I do hold back. I'm not just going to come out and fly off the wall or anything. So honesty, which could be a good one or a bad one, depending on which side of honesty you're after. But I think probably the best one is it's kind of like this, actually. You can come and talk to me. Anybody can come and talk to me about anything, right? So at work, I've mentored for people in various jobs of various stages in folks' careers, from junior apprentices north of that. HR related issues. So way back before we met, 2002, I was made redundant when the company I worked for went bust, and that was you're all redundant today type thing. So you didn't necessarily see it's coming. And prior to that, I'd got into the sort of employment law side to work out how it all works and be this not a union rep, because I wasn't the union side then, but understand what was happening. And I think because I've always had that sort of background in my role in various jobs and been sort of knowledgeable enough to know what's going on, but people have also asked, and if folk thought, I've got this big career problem, either my job's at risk, or I'm just looking for a change, and I still do it today. If folk will come up and talk, and I'm more than happy to talk about it. But then that extends outside of work as well. So I'll sit and listen. I don't necessarily have the right answer, but sometimes, and you know it yourself, just listening actually makes a big thing. So being a good listener. Apart from to my wife, obviously, I don't listen to her at all, so that would be the bad quality as well.
So on that, I love that about honesty as well, because it's an important thing. But you're right in saying that there can be a flip side of that, because honesty, certainly when it comes to family and friends, quite often can mean telling people what they need to hear as opposed to what they want to hear. So how would you say you approach being honest when you know it's not necessarily what that person wants to hear?
I think it's probably almost impossible to say, because it's got to be on a situation by situation, a person by person. You know, every answer to that would be different. I think really understanding where the person's coming from, if they're asking you a question, or truly try to understand what the issue is. You know, so, you know, people talk about, you know, always ask why and ask why and ask why. So, and sometimes that's it. I might not actually need to give an answer. You'll give the answer yourself, because they'll say, all right, what's up? You don't look too happy. All right, blah, blah, blah. Oh, why is that? And you can keep on going. So without actually saying anything at all, you can get to what the crux of things is. How do you give somebody, you know, if you like, an offensive, honest answer that you definitely wouldn't like to hear?
Yeah.
I think sometimes you just need to say it, right? You know, whatever it's going to be, right?
I was hoping you were going to say that. Direct.
Those specs don't suit you, you know, get new ones. You know? But sometimes got to be direct, but then be direct, but say why, you know. So you can't just say, nah, yeah, I don't like that, don't do it, and walk away. You need to then wait for the response and understand, and kind of then walk through it, you know.
Empathetically direct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Brilliant. Okay, right then. Shall we do, I wonder, shall we do another song? Or no, I got to ask you this question first before we do another song, because you just necked it back. Do you remember your first dram?
So whiskey, so like you mentioned earlier on, whiskey is one of the things that we do together, which I don't know how long we've actually done that. Certainly probably not as far back as 2005. That's a post-football thing, which I'm sure we'll come to. So I'm Scottish, from Scotland. I should know whiskey. I should understand whiskey. I should love whiskey. And I never did, right? Didn't like it. But probably because the only whiskies really were at Burns night suppers and things like that, where you necked a whiskey as the haggis came in. I think my first experience of whiskey was probably pre-18. I remember going to Hogmanay, so we'd be going around first footing people, and one of the guys' houses we used to go to, we'd come in, his dad would open the door, and you come in there, what do you want to drink? You'll have a whiskey, he'd fire a glass into your hand, and then he'd start pouring it and say, just say when, and he'd just fill it to, you know, like when, he'd just fill it to the top, right? And the first time I was there, he filled the glass right to the top, you know, a normal sort of drinking glass type thing, and it filled it to the top, and I was like, oh, fuck, what do I do with this? So I thought, I know, I'll just neck it in one, right? So went like that, necked this half a pint of whiskey essentially, and then went, oh, jeez, and I went, open my eyes again, he'd filled it up again. So I think that kind of put me off whiskey for
How old were you? Before, younger than 18, did you say?
Would have been, I was probably 17 and 18, because he did it obviously 3 years in a row sort of thing, right? But yeah, it's not like it was super young, but we were definitely on the cusp of 18, and you got a good highball glass of, well, probably grouse or whatever. Not a, you know, he's certainly not giving away his best malt or anything.
Yeah.
But then my 40th birthday, one of the neighbours got me a reasonable bottle of whiskey, which was an Ardmore 10-year-old, I think, or something like that. So I think that was my first proper sort of bottle of malt. And I did quite like it. I quite enjoyed it. And I thought, oh, that's quite nice. I must sort of think about this. But it was still like, that's quite burny. I'm not really there.
Yeah.
But then it was my dad's 70th birthday. And we thought, right, we should really buy a decent bottle of whiskey for him for his 70th. So I'd gone into a whiskey shop in town, which is no there anymore. And we'd had a look online, worked out what we were getting. So we'd seen this funny clay pot thing of whiskey and went in and said, I want to buy one of them. So the guy in the whiskey shop said, oh, is it for yourself? And I said, no, it's for my dad. And he says, oh, is it something special? And I said, oh, it's for his birthday, he's 70. And he went, all right, does he like whiskey? And he really knows his whiskey and stuff. And I says, yeah, I used to work in the industry and so on. So he knows his stuff. And he said, well, don't buy that because that's just pish. It's, I don't know what it was. I can't remember now. I think it was maybe a cheap Bomo, but it was cheap whiskey in a fancy bottle.
Right.
So he said, look at these ones. So I've just grabbed one from local. So here's a Lefroy. It's really not an impressive bottle of whiskey when you look at it on the shelf compared to some fancy ones. But he'd taken us across and said, "What's your budget?" And he says, "Well, look at these here." And there was these sort of old-fashioned sort of looking bottles of whiskey. So we bought one of them. But he also mentioned tasting nights. And I thought, oh, that'd be a great idea. I'll go to a tasting night with my dad. You'll love that. So we went to this tasting night. And the first whiskey that we had was very light. And you'll get this, Graham. It's very light. It was grassy. It was floral. What we would call a breakfast whiskey. And I thought, oh, I really like that. That's quite nice. I do like that. And then the next one that we had was the total opposite of the spectrum. It was some really heavy peated medicinal Isla thing or so. I can't remember what they were because I didn't write them down. That's what got me hooked. The fact that the same drink could be so different from one. Yeah. And then I thought, I need to now find out more about everything in the middle. And that was that was essentially 12 years ago now. So that was 12 years ago was what hooked me. And I don't know what the first dram was because I never wrote it down and I just can't remember. But I could tell you where it was, who was there, and who poured it.
Yeah, but you've written a lot of them down since. How many, if you were to guess? Crikey, I've never even thought about this.
No,
how many different expressions, shall we say, do you think that you might have tried? And do you think is there any whiskey that you have knowingly that has, like, and rule out any of the distilleries that have opened in the last sort of like 4 or 5 years, because there's loads of them that still have either, you know, like our own sort of Lindor's just first edition, but a lot of sort of, you know, distilleries that have opened recently. Apart from them, are there any sort of long time established distilleries that knowingly you've not tried one of their whiskies?
If we talk open distilleries,
it's
obviously some of the closed ones, can't afford to go there. They don't really happen. They do appear from time to time. Ones that I unknowingly haven't, I don't know. I mean, there's definitely going to be some, but I just don't know.
Not sure what ones. How many different expressions then? What do you think number wise you would be looking at?
Oh, God only knows. So
let's just skip past that question, because that's kind of like saying, how much of a raving alky are you?
Well, we'll just go with in December last year, the 2 December lockdowns, we bought advent calendars for Christmas. So that's 25 whiskies in an advent calendar. And we had 2 of them. So there's 50 straight off the back. And that doesn't include going off and actually buying stuff and going to the pub and doing a tasting night or, you know, all the rest of it. So it must be hundreds, which is just terrible when I think about it. But yeah, if I bear in mind that I had 2 advent calendars, so that's 50, and a tasting night is 5 or 6, and we've done, you know, a few of them.
I would say it's probably more like thousands when you think of, like,
it's maybe not thousands, but it's maybe it's probably hundreds and into over 1,000 easily.
I think if you were to ask our friends that work in the whiskey industry, they would say that that's experience.
It's knowledge.
Yes, it's knowledge.
Knowledge, not expertise. That's something else. The people that actually make money from it have got the expertise. We've just got some knowledge in there, and now I can misuse that knowledge in many, many ways.
So here's the question: the one, I think you got the book, the one that Ian Banks set about to answer on his tour.
His road trip.
In the book Raw Spirit. What do you have in all of those that you've tried? Is there one that stands out above the rest? Is there one, or even, like, you know, a handful, a few that you would say you have tasted, maybe even got a hold of a bottle, and I've never come close to anything kind of quite like
it? So the answer is probably yes, but I probably never thought about it in the way that, right, that was amazing, I know I could never have that again. So it's probably more where I would go back to things that I can buy. And, you know, I've been really lucky. We've been off. Some of the tasting nights have brought some phenomenal stuff along. Things have appeared in, if you've watched Angel Share, they've appeared in Iron Brew bottles, and we've been told what it is. Whether it is or not is different. I gave you a whiskey that was older than you. That might not have been. That could have been anything in there for all you know. But I at least know which barrel it came out of, you know. So,
Yeah.
so you know, getting the chance and going into distilleries and being able to open up a cask that's, you know, 50 plus, well, nearly 55 years old now, that one, right? So,
Yeah.
it is amazing. And it was lovely. Was it the best whiskey I've ever had? No, but it was one of the best things you get to try. So it was a really good experience, you know.
Yeah.
It's like if you like roller coasters and you're a thrill seeker and you go on the roller coasters. The best roller coaster is not necessarily the biggest one or the oldest one or the whatever. It might be the one that gave you the best view as you went around a corner, or that's got a loop the loop, or what, you know. It's going to be whatever it is that personally gave you that memory.
Yeah.
And you know, some of the experiences are probably there more than the whiskies. And whiskies is probably more. If I had to go out tomorrow and buy a bottle, where would I go first? So there's a few distilleries, particularly either ones and smoky ones, that, you know, would be my go-to something. And for folk that know me as well, there's things I would avoid like the plague, the big heavy sherried ones.
Yeah.
I just don't like them. In fact, just when you mentioned notes, there was a whiskey night the other night, and I think the real comment of the night was, "Sorry, Shaun, we should have sent you 5 different bottles from the ones that we actually gave you." Because they were all heavy sherried things, with scores of 6, 5, 4, 2, and 9.
You gave one of them a 9.
One of them was a Lefroy. So a Lefroy,
Okay.
Pedro Jimenez, and that's Isla Sherry's fine because the big peaty medicinal stuff takes the edge off. But yeah, there was a couple there. And we do, because it's on Zoom now, it's quite funny. You've done a few.
Yeah.
And you can see people's faces. And I'm sure Jess actually just sort of pours them out and then says, right, here's number 5. Everybody watch Shaun as I go, oh.
But that's it, and that's the glory of it, is everybody's tastes are different. Just back to your last song. Everybody is unique. Nobody likes exactly the same. And you know, it's and again, like you say, depending on like the mood, depending on the time of day, how you're feeling. That's the lovely thing about whiskey, is you might come in and on one given day, you know, oh, I fancy that, but the next day, you know, you're not going anywhere near it. It's
Well, I think it's that, and you get like you say, and we mentioned how we get on quite well with a couple of other pals, so we can go out to the pub and have a blether and talk chat. But part of that as well is nobody makes a decision about where we're going. It's a group decision. We go different places all the time. When we used to go and see the bands or the football, you know, we went everywhere, but it wasn't one person making that decision. And even, you know, most recently going out to the whiskey club, that was it. Choose a whiskey. Everybody got their choice. So what do you want to try? And we had a good night and bumped into other friends that we know mutually in the same place, which became a bigger night, right? But no, I think that's it. Everyone's like that. If you allow everybody to express themselves and have their say and have their choice, I think it makes a big difference to friendships and just how you get on through life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, those football matches, I think that epitomised that, because we went to so many different grounds. I can't remember. Did we ever go to? Well, we did. We did. We went to 1 or 2 grounds where one of us was a supporter. We did the.
Well, it was you that started it. So you, as a Morton fan, that's what started it all down at Capello against Dumbarton.
Hospitality.
Yeah. That was the train down to Greenock. A little warm-up beer in the Norseman.
The Norseman. Yeah.
The Norseman. Yep. Sawdust on the floor, proper sawdust on the floor.
Yeah.
And then into the pre-match hospitality and the stadium tour. The nice big dusty space where the East Renfrewshire Cup would have, but St Mirren had won it last. So there was just this space that they hadn't dusted since they last had it, which was brilliant. Right? That was what kind of made the tour. But that was the thing. So, you know, that was your idea. You thought, this is a good idea, we should do this. And we thought, that's a brilliant idea. And then that kicked on from there. And I think we did Falkirk with Andrew. So that was his team.
Yeah.
We went to a Motherwell game for Hibs, which is me, which we missed the goal for because we maybe delayed our entry.
For an extra pint.
Extra pint, right? And I don't think anybody was a Partick Thistle or a Hamilton or a Clyde fan or some of the other weird ones, but it was good. You know? But
Still
the big thing is, well, it was neutral. It was largely a neutral day, so there might have been one person supporting the team, but everybody else was going for the crack, and it was a good thing.
Yes.
And the blood on the ceiling in the pub afterwards in Maryhill.
That was a memorable one.
Yes.
That was like a American Werewolf in London kind of pub, as I remember.
Yeah. I can't even remember what it's
Asked
called.
if we had any chibs when we walked in the door, and because we didn't, they like handed us stuff. You might need this.
Quite honestly, midway through a game of pool on the table, we played a shot and stood up and went, "What's that on the ceiling? Is that a blood stain?"
Is that a blood stain? Oh, brilliant. Right, back to the music, because your next song, so you put down here Surfing USM by Carter, Unstoppable Sex Machine, but then you had in brackets, or what, a Glasgow Kiss.
Sealed with a Glasgow Kiss. So Carter, the Unstoppable Sex Machine is more back to my college days. And that's when we used to go and see lots of bands in the student unions. So that goes away back to Glasgow Tech Union, King Tut's Wawa Hut, the Barrowlands, and so on. And Carter was one of these guys, and this is now early 90s, 91 maybe, something like that. And it was just raw energy. It's only two guys, Jim Bob and Fruitbat. I can't remember which one's actually Carter, but just the two guys themselves. And it was just raw energy. So we come back to the kind of post-punk Iron Maiden type stuff. This was, post-new romantic punk or something, I don't know. But really that full jump about. So the first track, Surfing, doesn't have any lyrics really. It's just got some quotes from Red Dwarf, where Rimmer talks about aging, and there's a bunch of swear words at the end. So it just opens up a little quote.
Start off where they're saying, "You fat bastard."
Yeah, you fat bastard. You fat bastard. So, so that's it. And then it's just jump about. So as an opener for a gig, that's it. The crowd's immediately going, so you're just bouncing about everywhere. It's superb. And then the album itself, so 30 something, of which I still have a tour t-shirt that still fits me as well, I'd like to point out. And it doesn't even look that tight. I also wore that t-shirt on my first date with my wife. So, and my Doc Marten boots and my leather jacket. So there's some funny stories in there. But it was raw energy. So I think we saw them at a Students' Union, which was probably Strathclyde, first time round. And then again, they toured. I think they were at the Barras. Then we went through to Edinburgh to see them, and somewhere in the Grassmarket. They were doing all these sort of weird pubs and sort of hall type venues. It was a really strange kind of thing. But it was built, and we just followed a few of these bands around the Central Belt as they did it. Yeah. And Sealed with a Glasgow Kiss was just another one of these kind of funny songs. And you talked about how do you help people and listen to people and all the rest of it. And that one itself is actually about domestic violence, but it's about domestic violence from a man's point of view, if you like. So he's the guy that's hitting his wife, headbutting his wife in this case. But equally, he knows he's doing it wrong, or not doing it wrong. He knows he's wrong doing it, and apologising and saying I really love you and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But it was quite strange because I remember at the time, there was a girl at college who had been battered by an ex-boyfriend or something like that. Not too badly, thankfully. But it was just at that point, and that's when I think I really started listening to lyrics properly. Beforehand you just sang them blindly because you knew what they were, but you didn't actually read into what they meant. And I think it was kind of tail end of the 90s, and just obviously when I was that age, we actually started working out particularly some of the sort of political things. The world was a different place then, although actually now when you look at it with Ukraine and potential Cold War, because that will develop into a Cold War, it's probably going to regress back to where we were in the 80s, you know. But I think it struck home because it was really, as much as it was a strange kind of post-punk electronic kind of album, there was a lot of strong messages in there about life in general in the UK. And that one just hit home because somebody was clearly the other end of this song for me. That was not so much quite close to me, but just somebody that I knew, and you know, she'd opened up about what happened and why she hadn't been at college and all the rest of it. And, you know, it was just, it's terrible to see, but you know, just being able to be there and help somebody, and that song just sort of reminds me of that from my way back. And some great concerts.
Yeah, and some great concerts as well. So you talk about the words in songs, and kind of again, in many of them, it's very clear what a song's about, and very often they can be a little bit more vague for us to interpret and take from it as well. So that's clearly one that's had a big kind of impact in the words. So outside of music, can you think of a book or a podcast or something that's kind of had the same effect, or what the most recent, book, podcast, something that you heard that's had kind of quite an effect, be it just sort of inspirational or be it like really thought-provoking?
It's kind of weird because inspiration sometimes is just laughter. So I remember way back, if you remember Clive James, guy used to do, he was a journalist and such, but he did on the Clive James on TV and kind of poked fun at life in general and stuff. He wrote a book. Aussie guy, yeah, Aussie guy. So he wrote a book a way back, and it was just like his travels or viewing life, and I can't actually remember now, but I remember it being a kind of laugh a minute, turn the page. So this, if you like, this is, I read that before I started listening to or reading lyrics to understand them, or interpreting lyrics. So this was his sort of light-hearted view on life around the world, and that made you want to go and see the world and understand things. And maybe that's why I started listening to what people were writing down in songs or in poetry or so on. The book that I'm reading just now, and the name's just totally gone out of my head, it's a book by a Glasgow author that won one of the prizes sort of pre-lockdown, about a kid growing up in Glasgow in the 70s or 80s type thing, called Shug, and I can't remember what the book's called. But it's really a like poverty type life and growing up in, the sort of schemy type slums, mother and father divorced, remarried, alcoholism, all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And, it's strange to read it because you see pictures of, Glasgow or Edinburgh or any big city in the 70s and the early 80s, and it's really quite deprived some places, but people lived there,
Yeah.
And you like to think that people don't live there now in that kind of circumstance and so on, but clearly they do, in this country in particular, but in everywhere else as well. And then you look at Ukraine and folk are living with bombs falling on their heads, which you just can't comprehend. But I think there's probably not a single book, so to speak, but I think it's more, you get that range where somebody can really put a spin on things and make it quite funny, right? But he's talking about some serious subjects.
Yeah.
And then, this one's, it's not dark, it's just probably quite true. It's quite gritty, you would call it. And I'll try and remember the name before we finish. But genuinely a good book. It's not necessarily an easy read, right? It's you get to a point where you say, "I need to put that down now. I can't necessarily go on to the next piece." Whereas some of the classics like Lolita are not an easy read, and I managed to get about 3 chapters in, and it's just, you can't read it, right? It's quite strange. But no, it's interesting. And another one actually that I read, which was quite strange, is I quite like biographies or autobiographies sort of thing. And I read Norman Schwarzkopf, Stormin' Norman from the First Iraq War, right? His autobiography, and you'd probably enjoy it. And I'm sure it was an autobiography as well, but it just gave a completely different view. So it is his life pre-Iraq, and how he grew up as a kid and how he came through, and then obviously Iraq and what it meant for him, and you know, things that he saw, things that he remembers, you know, folk that he lost, but also coming back home, and there's the joy of actually, if you like, finishing the job. But, you know, for him, obviously it was a job, right? And so some of these things, and that one really kind of sticks out just because it surprised me so much. It's not a book, I don't even know why I picked it up. Somebody must have gave me it, you know, and said, read that, it's really quite good. So it's things like that. Sometimes it's just something that really surprises you. The book that you really want to go and read is not necessarily the best book, and when you get it, you're quite often disappointed. Same with going to the movies. But the one that you didn't really want to see is the one that surprises you. So I think that's it. It's being open to just trying something new, reading something, and then going in with open eyes and seeing what's there. Yeah, but nothing specifically.
I'm a great believer in the book that you need at any given point in time in your life will find you. I'm a great believer in that. It's happened to me so many times.
I think that's probably right, and I think sometimes the book you think you need is not the one that you want. And I can open a book, start reading it, and if I'm not enjoying it, I'll put it down. I won't throw it out. I'll put it down, and I'll come back to it some other time when you might enjoy it. But I think that's sort of the opposite to what you say. It's not the book I need just now, so I'll move away. And the book that you will need finds it. So what I'm reading just now is fine, and it's quite enjoyable. But I can't read it very quickly because sometimes it's quite hard. Not, you know, I'm not sort of sitting bursting into tears and going, I can't read this anymore. But sometimes
just hard going. Yeah. Okay. Tell me something about Shaun Gauld that very few people know.
I don't know. You probably know more of the things that people don't know than I do. So we touched on whiskey. So Scottish through and through, should know about whiskey. But I wasn't born in Scotland. And
I don't think I knew that. Were you born in Hong Kong?
No. I did primary school in Hong Kong. So I was born within the sound of the Bow Bells at midday when they were ringing. So I'm as Cockney as you could possibly get.
I can't say anything after that, can
I? and my dad was at Lord's watching the cricket at the time, because obviously in those days you went to maternity wards with your wife. When I was born, like 30 seconds past midday. So the 12 bells of Bow would have still been ringing, and I was born in Islington, which is within the sound when you look at the projections. So technically a Scottish Cockney. I left just in case you didn't catch that Cockney twang in my accent, you know. I left when I was like 6 months old, so I didn't really pick it up too much. But
right. Wow, there we go. Right, okay, before our next song, here's a tricky one for you. Or it might not be, it might be dead easy. Biggest challenge that you think you faced in the last 10 years and how you overcame it?
Biggest challenge? I don't know. Challenge is maybe the hard one. There's challenging times, right? So obviously lockdown has been tough for everybody in a variety of different ways, right? So I suppose first time when everybody came home, you thought you were coming home for a 2-week kind of work from home, this will be a bit of an adventure type thing, which then sort of went to 3 weeks, and then you were thinking, oh, it might be the summer. So that's a challenge. Everybody's come through that, right? And well, most people have come through it. Obviously, some folk didn't. But you know, that brought its own challenges because you were now living on top of each other, you know, quite literally. Whereas normally you're out of the house, you know, 10 hours a day at work, you know, your partner's away, your kids are at school or at college, so you're not all living on top of each other, you're only in for a bit. So that was quite a challenge, and I think we've come through that quite strong. Although my daughter did move out at the first opportunity she got, right, when lockdown was lifted.
Same.
But, you know, that's one of these things. So that's one of these things that was a challenge. My dad died last year, unfortunately, after a reasonably short illness, and that's challenging in its own. What was probably more challenging there is my brother stays abroad in Canada, and then obviously in lockdown you couldn't travel easily. And even if he had travelled, he wouldn't have necessarily been allowed to go into the hospital and see him and visit for periods of that period, because he was in for a good few months. So that was quite challenging, but it was more challenging on the having to be the middleman and try and keep in contact and work out what's happening. Because generally speaking, every day there was no real update, So, we could ping, and it's good to have Skype and WhatsApp and things, because you could just leave a note. Number one is different time zones, all the rest of it. But those kind of things are quite challenging. And my father-in-law died previously, both of them just old age, ultimately, right? But it wasn't COVID, which isn't necessarily a blessing, but at least you're not just a COVID statistic when, these kind of things come back. So, last year had its challenges in there. Just adjusting to that and being able to support my wife and, the rest of the family when my father-in-law died, and then, being able just to come through when my dad died and have them support me and vice versa. But just that made it hard. Before that, I think, not like getting up in the morning, but if you just look at day to day, you just take things. There's not been a big mountainous challenge. It's just been, here where we're going, there's a route forward, and you take each day as it comes. So I think maybe the biggest challenge is if people look at things as there's this huge challenge at the end, that's what maybe makes things harder. I think you can take things a day at a time. Always try and be quite optimistic, but break things down into smaller pieces and just keep going forwards.
Yeah, that's good advice. It's very good advice, because I think you're right. I was actually did an hour last night. I'll do an hour after we finish tonight on the radio.
Oh, you're running? All right.
No, this is the radio show. Oh, crikey, no, I've not been running. Certainly, I've been running, but not as much as I did a few weeks ago. But just exactly what you say. I was talking a little bit about that, about actually sometimes we can get too immersed in the moment. We can get too busy. Sometimes we need to kind of step back, because that sort of, in that day to day, we can get lost in it, and it's good to just kind of take a step back and kind of look back at all of those little days at a time that you've taken and how far you've come. Because sometimes when you compare yourself to who you were years ago, it kind of, you realise, crikey, I think we've all probably come a lot further than we give ourselves credit for. And
I think if you look back and said, right, where are all those hard parts? How would you do it now? Yes, you would definitely do things differently. But whatever you did, you'd still get past that. And that's probably the key,
Yeah.
Would you do it differently with hindsight? Yes, because if it happened again right now, would you do it differently? Possibly not, because you get blinded by that challenge. But if you really could take the time and look back and say, this is what I've learned, or I knew somebody that's been there, so I can go and talk to them, and such. I mean, I talked about somebody whose your role was maybe going to be at risk, and just being able to talk to them. I've been there. I've unfortunately been made redundant. I've made people redundant. It's not good being on either side of the fence.
Yeah.
But equally, having done it and been there, you can talk to other people, and you can come through that. So it's a challenge for anybody, but there's the vast majority of people, thankfully, come through these things. I know some people don't come through it, but hopefully, if you could just spend the 5 minutes, you can avoid somebody going down that path and take them a different route. So
yeah. So here's one for you. One of the things that we've not spoken about, you wound up in a career in IT, and have been, in that line of business for a number of years. I don't know anybody. Sorry?
That's polite. A number of years.
So I don't know anybody that's worked in IT for more than sort of 10, 15 years that hasn't at some point in that career really fucked up, really made a howler of a mistake. I know I have more than once. But what would you consider your biggest with the job, the biggest fuck up that you made? And more importantly, what did it teach you?
So number one, I never got caught. It's probably the good thing. Fuck ups. So I started in IT, God, when was that? 1993-ish, something like that, you know.
Yeah.
So started work, essential and help desk type thing, answering the phones and sorting out people's problems with software or printers or keyboards or whatever. Which was great because it was client facing, but without actually being in the face of clients. And most of the clients were pubs and off sales and sort of small independent shops and stuff.
Yeah.
So there was an interesting crowd of people that you had. So you learnt how to talk to these interesting crowds of people. Sometimes you definitely had to go to their level and tell them just to shut the fuck up and listen to me. You know, quite literally, where your boss next to you would go, and then you would just sort of wave at them and say, "No, it's okay," because I'm talking to these guys in the pub in the East End. So, you know, trying to be polite is not going to work, right?
Yeah.
But then I've probably carried that forward, and now that I work for a reasonably large American firm, having a fairly obvious Glaswegian accent on, well, voice calls in those days, but now it would be video calls, so you can't actually hide. And not using the mute button is probably the biggest mistake, I think, actually, because I've fortunately never promoted code into the wrong place or brought servers down or done anything like that. So it's normally something I've said rather than something I've actually done. Sometimes said almost quite deliberately as the statement to say, look, hold on, this is how we're actually going to do it or fix it or whatever, or no, you're absolutely wrong. You know, I'll just be quite blunt and say, you're wasting my time. But then, unfortunately, as well, by not having the mute button on, and then there's a silence, and then the big boss says, "Oh, did somebody have a comment?" And my comment was probably quite valid, but had to be rephrased. But yeah, I know once I've definitely done that once and said whatever it was off mute, and the high Hegian at the time did say, "Oh, did somebody have a comment to make?" And I rephrased my comment, which was well accepted. But the call afterwards was quite clear. Make sure you're on mute or phrase it differently because that won't last. But I'm still there, so it's
You're still there.
not too bad.
You never felt the need to tell like the biggest of big bosses visiting at a Christmas do how he should invest his money.
No, that wasn't me.
You left that to me.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I've never done that. Even to be fair, I think on Christmas night outs and all the rest of it, I've never actually. I'm more likely to say something stupid sober than I am drunk. But yeah, I didn't actually incite the big boss or in a public forum. Town halls. Don't raise your hand and put your head above the parapet and ask anything stupid. So I can. I'll ask the seeded question. I'll ask a sensible, banal question in these big public forums. But
yeah,
yeah,
stayed safe.
Yeah.
So, what would you say is, be it in IT or be it before or outside, what would you say is the best piece of advice that you've ever been given, and who gave you
it? Probably actually, just kind of live for the moment is probably the best advice. And it probably received a couple of times from various folk, and probably more at work, where you're maybe just having a hard time or so on or whatever. But folk come saying, yeah, this is just the moment today. Look at the moment tomorrow and just look forward all the time and then live for that moment. So there was a lady that I used to work for in Edinburgh in Kingston SCL, Susie. I'll not give her second name, but she was really good, a very people person. She was also a very touchy-feely person because she was the kind of person that would give you a hug when you came in the morning, which was strange, right? That's, when I moved into that team, that was a bit, I was like, oh, hold on, this is a bit weird. Because I'm not a touchy-feely person like that. I can listen to folk, I'll shake your hand, but I don't give people hugs. If you know me, I don't give folk hugs. I do probably do more now after lockdown because I haven't seen folk for so long. I think I gave you a hug when I saw you in SMWS the last
Yeah.
time. That's unusual. But she was very a very positive
I quite
person.
liked it.
I think you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But she was really positive, and I think that same advice from various folks in different places has been it's all you, live for the moment, don't hold on to things like that and move on, is probably the thing. So,
Yeah.
but I will come and get you back if you do me a baddie.
Would you bang somebody on the ear? That's a great little segue.
Oh, that was well done. I see what you've done there. Song number 4.
Yes, Water Boys.
So a bang in the ear. So this is where, if you like, so like I said, my wife and kids never got any bags, so they never got these songs right, and never even got the bands, to be fair. So this is the Water Boys, who's Mike Scott, yeah. So this is late 80s, and this came off an album called Fisherman's Blues. So the Water Boys before were a bit more indie rocky, and this was a sort of total diversion to them, to a sort of Irish folk music type album, which is strange because that's a big diversion away from what I'd have been listening to and buying at the time, right? So it was quite a strange one, you know. But it's an album that's always been there, and you know, when vinyl wasn't around and I was using Spotify and stuff, it always sat on there. But a bang in the ear kind of actually looks like the piece that we've just covered. Is look at where you are, but when you're going to. So the phrase of itself is just you're trying to look for the right partner, right? And when you don't, you know, if it doesn't work out that night or that date or whatever it is, bang in the ear and you just kind of move on to the next one and try and look forward, and you're trying to find your soulmate is really what it is. So probably that's around about the 80s as well. So that's probably not far away. So, you know, as a teen, you know, you're looking for a girlfriend, you're looking for a partner or wherever you try to go. And the right person's out for you there. It just doesn't mean you haven't met them yet if it's not that night in the pub or wherever. So I always looked at that, and that song kind of always sat with me then, you know.
Yeah.
And I was really lucky because I met Julie in, you know, probably not long after that, actually, in the early 90s. And we're still together, quite happy to this day, sort of thing. But
what sort of places did you go
with Julie at that age?
Whilst you were in that phase of searching?
All right. So not nightclubs. I'm definitely not a nightclub. Well, I did occasionally, but yeah, I'm definitely out of sorts. You could go back to Freaks. I'm standing at the side going, why am I here? Not even, I don't want to be in the dance floor. But concerts for sure, student unions, local pub quizzes, all sorts of weird places. I also used to work night shift in one of the supermarkets at the time. So McKinnon's bar in the Gallowgate under the bridge at 8 a.m. in the morning, because that's when you came off night shift and you could go to the pub. I didn't meet anybody in there, but we walked by there the other day, and I said, oh God, I used to go in this, and it's still there, right? And it looks exactly the same. But I walked by and said, would I go in there now? Absolutely not.
Does it still open at 8 o'clock in the morning?
It probably does, actually. It probably does. It might not now post-COVID, but I'm sure it did pre-COVID. And it's a weird one because there used to be the pubs down where the Daily Record building was, so the night shift workers and the journalists they were open in the morning. The Copycat, there was the Pigeon or the Sparrow or whatever it was up at the fruit market. So the fruit market guys would come out after their kind of night shift, because obviously all the vans are out by 6 o'clock in the morning and away doing the deliveries.
Yeah.
But the one in the gallery is just a Jakey's pub because Jakey's there's no business there that's coming out at night shift. It's just a Jakey pub. And then it was even better because at midday, when you're staggering home through the town, I'd bump into one of my pals who's maybe got like a day job and was out for their lunch, and we were like, whoa! But that was just like going home at midnight or 11 o'clock, right? So it's
at lunchtime. Yeah, that kind of reminds. I'm laughing, but night shifts in the RAF. People that watched that was That was rife back in the day. You'd come off night shifts and you would go out all day session. You know, if you were feeling, you'd maybe have an hour or two, lie down when you got back after breakfast, just to kind of let the fry up settle, and then you were up, showered, knocking on the door of some local boozer at 11 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, you were wasting an hour there, so straight to town.
Yeah, well, there you go. Right, so I've got a load of quick fire questions, but I think we might do them after your last song, because it might be football related, or it might not be. I don't know.
It is.
But it is Sunshine on Leith by the Proclaimers. And
primarily for football reasons. So yeah, Sunshine on Leith, huge Hibs anthem, and I'm a big Hibby from a way back. And I think the album's tail end of the 80s anyway, 87 or 88, something like that. Totally under the radar, nothing really there, wasn't the kind of things I would listen to. And then it came around to the Hearts buyout with Wallace Mercer, and it came a bit of an anthem for them then, which is when I'd heard the song first. And because of that, bought the album, obviously. And it's a good album all round after that. But then it's just something that still resonates from then, because it was really quite meaningful and poignant for the hands-off Hibs type thing. But then also, fortunately, I've managed to go to various cup finals that we've actually won, and a few that we've lost. But so hands off Hibs in 1990, when it became an anthem for the fans against Wallace Mercer, and then like the following year, Hibs won the CIS Cup or whatever it was against Dunfermline, and that was the first time I think I'd heard it in a stadium with 60,000 people, which was quite amazing, because that was before as well tannoys and things that played music like you do now. So that was just, they won the cup final, the team got their cup and were doing the lap of honour, and obviously it wasn't spontaneous with 60,000 folk, but it got up and running, and that was great, and then on an odd occasion from a sort of home game here and there, but again the football at Hampden, and then most recently to please Rangers fans when we actually won the Scottish Cup for the first time in my lifetime and almost every other Hibs fan's lifetime. So and that was great, so it's one of them.
I remember seeing that day, because it was knocking on it. I used to work with an awful lot of Hearts fans at Sky, and I do recall like a number of them setting like status on like instant messenger, like 125 years, or was it like about 126 years or something?
What was it?
It was a crazy long time, wasn't it?
I think it was 114. It's 114.
Yeah, crazy.
1902 to 2016.
Yeah, but then the videos, the atmosphere that day. I mean, I've seen so many of them, and like you say, that the atmosphere. Were you at that cup final as well?
Yeah.
So what did that feel like when you've got that, because that's Hampden. Raft was Hampden, wasn't it? Raft.
Hampden. So that's 60,000 folk, maybe, and 55,000 folk, something like that. More if you count everybody that was on the pitch at the end, I suppose. But but no, the biggest thing was relief, right? There's that. So when David Gray scored the winning goal essentially in injury time, that was just euphoria, right? And amazing euphoria. But then you could see it was relief everywhere, because it had been so long, which is more of a standing joke than anything, right? Yes, sense of pride, all the rest of it, and Hearts and Hibs fans and stuff, that's good. But I think it's more the sense of relief for most folk, and it didn't matter who you were playing, and we've got the semi-final coming up in a couple of weeks against Hearts, where I think that's a clearly well-defined one-way street at the moment, but that's now irrelevant. It's like that's a live for the moment thing. So That was a live for the moment, but it was 114 years worth of moments that for some people, though nobody would have been alive for that period of time. So yeah. So yeah, that was it. It's one of these ones to say, bucket list, I was there and it's done, you know.
Yeah, makes it kind of quite special, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Brilliant. I love that. Right, songs are done. Songs are done, but I do have some quick questions. I do have some quick questions. We could sit here and chat all night, but I've got some quick fire questions for you. I'm going to start with one I've not asked anybody before because probably not many people would get it, but you will.
All right, I'm worried now.
So, it's a choice. It's a choice. Normally I would ask people Indian or Chinese or Thai, but you're not having a choice. It's a choice of 2 Indian dishes for you.
Right.
So
I grew up in Hong Kong. Should it not be Chinese food?
No, it's you're only getting a choice of Indian.
Right.
And you'll see why. You can choose between a korma.
Oh no, I know what the second one is.
Or a jadataz.
Definitely the korma. So the 12 chili jadataz special in the Indian restaurant, and so I think on that night as well, I was going to order the jadataz purely because it had 12 chilies. You know, there was korma 1 chili, Rogan Josh 2 chilies, vindaloo 3 chilies, jadataz 12, and I thought, oh, I'm having that. So you ordered it, and I thought, oh, and then I think who else was there? Wilson ordered it.
Yeah.
And then did Stephen order it? Or did something? I think Stephen might have ordered it as well. Actually, there was definitely 3 of them.
Yeah.
So I thought, there's no way any of you are eating these. I'll have a chicken sag. And it was definitely a life-defining moment having the chicken sag and watching 2 people drop like flies, and you mechanically, without even breathing or sweating, and just occasionally having some water, just going through it. And then, more importantly, when you finished, the waiter coming up and saying, nobody's ever eaten one of them in the restaurant before. He says, we sell them, nobody finishes them, and we send lots of them away in takeaways, but clearly nobody finishes them. But yeah, you were the first, apparently. So if that restaurant was still there, your name would be on a board.
I got the picture somewhere, I think, because I took a little picture of the menu because I couldn't believe it. I was like, I'd never heard of a dish like that before. Vindaloo, yes. Phal, yes. Tindaloo in some places, yes, but jadataz.
Tindaloo, that was what you had the next morning, was it not?
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember the text message. Ring of fire.
Yes, indeed. Anyway, okay, so some more questions. What would you call the life story, or what would you call your life story in a book? What would it be called?
God only knows.
And bear in mind, your son's just joined. Evening, Kyle.
Has he? Oh, you can see more than I can.
Yeah.
Oh, there you are. Was he actually joined the room?
No, he's watching.
All right, because I can just see it in the way that you it pops up in purple like we're on. So I don't know. It definitely have to be sort of one thing at a time. So it's one drama at a time, or one step at a time, or something like that. It's definitely small steps, something like that. Just take it in small doses.
Yeah.
If I really thought about it, I'll come up with some pun type title, because puns are normally me, but it's gone blank. You've killed me with them, even.
Right. That's all right. No, that's cool. I like that. It just, you kind of get you could work it. You'd work on it.
I'd have to come to one of the professional guys and get them to come in, Graham. Yeah. You'd be able to come up with one.
Right. Okay. I love this one because so many different answers to this one. If you had £100 million, what would you do with
it? So the first thing I would do is I would buy a Mark II RS 2000 Escort, right? Because that was my first car. And Julie's just turning and laughed at that, right? Because she's now in the other room. In fact, you can see her in the mirror in the window here. There we are. Reflections in the window. So yeah, if we won the lottery, folk have said what you do, and I would buy one of these old cars from the mid 70s, because that was my first car as an 18-year-old, and it was brilliant. It was brilliant. First car, stupid car. I think I had it for a year and insurance was like £800, which is now dead cheap for an 18-year-old with a 2-litre car, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't crash it either, which was good. I did get it in the summertime, rear-wheel drive, which was great because we went shooting around the country and all the rest of it. And then in like September, it rained once, and I remember going round Eastwood Toll sideways because it was the first time I'd driven in the wet, and rear-wheel drive cars don't take roundabouts that well. That was a brilliant car. I had to get rid of that because it was just stupidly expensive to insure. So I would buy one of them. I would buy other cars as well, maybe. So something like £100 million, I don't know, right? That's just like obscene amount of money. Yeah. If you got enough money to be the kind of boring enough money, pay off the mortgage, get yourself comfortable, the rest of it, would I actually retire? I'd probably retire from the job I'm doing today, but I probably wouldn't retire to be sitting doing nothing, which is kind of the key, which is what, 100 million would let you do. But then you'd want to do something else with it. And I don't just mean invest it to do stuff. What could you do? Do you buy a football team? Do you buy a distillery? It's like, I just don't know. But I would be.
Oh, do you buy a distillery? No.
Well, you probably could. So McCladdy 10 years ago sold for like, was it 10 million? It was a small number of millions, right? It wasn't stupid money. Now they would be, but Orlando's that you mentioned, how much did they say they invested to get up and running? They had a slush fund of about 5 million to get up and running.
It was less than 10 million, wasn't it?
You could start one for a fraction of your 100 million, So, but I think I would go and do some fun stuff with it. But I think let some, obviously a big holiday, blah blah. But do some fun stuff with it, but then try and do some helpful stuff as well, which maybe sounds a bit cliche as well. And that doesn't mean giving it all to charity or whatever. But I don't know. To have to give something to Hibs and get them to buy a decent striker for this year,
Well, there you go. That's a noble pursuit. Right. Okay. Last question. Well, maybe not last question because it's a multi-loaded one. So, your choice to accompany you on a desert island. One person, one album, one movie, and one book.
So one person I would really have to say Julie. She might not thank me for that because I don't think she'd want to be on a desert island with me, right? But I think genuinely, and we touched on earlier with soulmates and banging the ear and stuff like that. Yeah. So Julie from that side. What did you say? One book,
album.
One album. I'm trying to think of the album with the most songs on it, right? I think to be fair, probably a Queen album, A Night at the Opera, Sheer Heart Attack.
I was just going to say maybe A Night at the Opera. Crikey,
A Night at the Opera is probably the one because it's got Bohemian Rhapsody's on there, classic, but then some of their slower, sort of more poignant tracks as well. So it's a good mix of an album, and you can never go wrong with Freddie Mercury anyway.
Movie.
Gregory's Girl for a movie.
Oh, yes.
Gregory's Girl for a movie. So this Joey's definitely not thanking me now because she can't watch it.
She not like that, though.
I do like that. But anytime it's ever on the telly, it's watched or recorded and watched. So Gregory's Girl for a movie because that's just, I think that's essentially me growing up as a kid, right? That's round about that time. Yeah. And that was me growing up as a kid. So yeah, that would be that. Also means that I would have a telly on the desert island as well. So that would be quite good.
Oh, I see. Stretching the rules now, right?
And last one for a book. Let's see. I think if I was reading a book, so I've not read it yet actually. I've got it to read. Is a book. I don't know if it's after John Peel died. So it's a biography of John Peel's kind of life. So again, ties into all the musical stuff. Ties into childhood because I grew up with John Peel on the radio, right? Which is where some of the eclectic, weird things that live in the record cabinet, even things like Dexy's Midnight Runners, Come On Eileen, right? Which is massive. And Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Relax, huge. Everybody knows them. But nobody knew them when I heard them by John Peel playing them the first time on the radio. And I thought, oh, that's amazing. I've never heard anything like that, you know. And I went out and bought them. So I think that, and I haven't read it yet. So I think I would take that because I haven't read it. I think that would be my 4. So what's that? Joey, Gregory's Girl, Queen, and John Peel.
Yeah.
That's all quite close to life, actually. Football, Gregory's Girl, music, and music.
Well, there you go. I didn't actually write, so that 2 closing questions, and they are related. It wasn't intentional. But given that you're on this desert island, it's only fair that if you're going to be on that desert island for the rest of your life with one person, one album, one movie, and one book, you should be able to get to choose where that island is. So somewhere that you've never been before.
Somewhere I've never been before. Right, so...
Well, I'm assuming you've never been stranded on a desert island before, so you get...
I've never been stranded. I have been on essentially desert islands, though, tropical islands. I thought you were going to say you'd be allowed a bottle of whiskey, and which bottle of whiskey would you take? But if it was an island, I would have... Before you said where you've not been before, it was going to be Isla. Because then you could do all the whiskey stuff. But if it was an island I've never been before... to be fair, I think actually it would maybe be somewhere like Iceland or something, because I quite fancy going to Iceland. And I suppose it is kind of desertish because there's only a tiny bit of it that's actually populated. But yeah, I think I would maybe go for Iceland. Now, I might regret that when it becomes winter, and I think actually a desert island with a palm tree and 2 coconuts is a better idea now. But I think I'd maybe go Iceland first. Let's go.
Well, Iceland. if not Iceland, the final question, because if you're on an island for the rest of your life, maybe Iceland you wouldn't like to be remembered as like frozen to death, but if you're away and that's it, you're gone, out of sight, but necessarily not out of mind, how would you like to be remembered?
How would I like to be remembered? I think, to be fair, probably no real specific way, but just having been there for people, you know, to talk to, even doing this, right? To just having been there. So if, you know, so you pass away, it'd be nice. I don't like funerals. Funerals are rubbish, right? You know, like I said, my dad and my father-in-law died, so funerals are rubbish. So it's not like I particularly want people to turn up at my funeral and remember me, but it'd be nice just to have folk remember you. Just say, oh, he was a good guy, you know. That would be enough just for folk to be, you know, shed a tear and then get on with their life, you know. So that would do.
Here's how your son's going to remember you. Says, whiskey crazy as he counts all the bottles that you have.
So Kyle didn't join at the start, I know. So before we started, Graham said, would it be all right if we had a dram during this? And I immediately said, well, yes.
And what better way to end it as well with a little slange. Thank you very much, and please, Shaun, stay in the green room so we can have a little chat and I can finish my wee dram tonight. But thank you so much for coming on. I have loved you being on. I've loved chatting to you, hearing your story. Some kind of funny ones in there as well. It's been brilliant. Long may the whiskey journey continue. But you know, we didn't even talk about your venture into a little bit of writing about whiskey as well.
Oh, we've done a little online. So part of lockdown was faffing about with a whiskey account on Instagram for a bit of a laugh. Kyle was on. I don't know, Kirsty Bill, and she's probably at work, but it started as a bet to see who could get the most Instagram followers. I'm winning by 1,000, I think, you know, so I'm miles ahead. So we started a little Instagram account and just put up some funny posts of whiskey and bottles and stuff, which just kind of developed and became fun. And then online magazine guy had got in touch and said I want to write. So we'd invested in a barrel of whiskey, Graham, myself, and Stephen, and we wrote about that, and it was great. So it was great actually just to do that, even though it was remotely for ourselves. But that was good fun. And we've done a couple of blind tasting notes. I've got another whole set here to go through next as well. So I'm going to review another whole bunch of these bottles come through, and it's just a bit of fun now. It's
for anybody that is perhaps interested or wants to know a little bit more about whiskey, it's a great place to start. So where can they find your Instagram account?
Instagram, whiskey at home with underscores, whiskey_at_home. And it's me, and it's now public knowledge. It's me, because I think I managed to get away with most of lockdown until the last whiskey tasting. And then our whiskey colleagues that host us, Graham, in the green room at the end of the night said, "Who's this whiskey at home guy?" And nobody guessed me, actually. They had some bizarre guesses, but not me. And then eventually the cat was out the bag. So yeah. Yeah, that's it. On Insta. So find me on Insta.
There we go. See, it's always nice. Come and get a little plug as well, because it's a great little account as well.
It's good fun. It's a great community out there as well. Whiskey, non-whiskey, but just some of the things, and yourself as well on there. Some of the fitness kind of guys, the mindfulness guys. And there's everybody's out there, and it's nice to get that different bit of opinion sometimes. And in snippets, so nothing big and serious is the way it was, so I don't know who would actually come and now sit and watch me talk for an hour and a half on this, but
well, you'd be surprised.
90 seconds, well, I do typically on Facebook after. Not this one, I won't watch this ever again.
Well, thank you for coming on. I've enjoyed it, and I'll say to you what I say to all my guests. It might not be tomorrow, it might not be in a week or in a month, but at some point your curiosity will kind of, draw you back. And you watch this back, it might be an hour and a half that you might laugh at, but you'll learn something about yourself if you watch this back. I trust me. I know these things.
I probably will. I know Kyle will, because he'll find the bits to embarrass me.
Well, there we go. Thank you very much indeed. It's been an absolute blast, and we'll be back again next week. And as always, I'm keeping it a secret. I do know who's on, but you can wait until next Wednesday to find out. What I will tell you is that he's written, I think we're up to about 13 books. He's like a sporting author that we've got on. He's from Middlesbrough, Shaun, and his Scottish team's not Hibs, but kind of green.
All right, okay. So the second team in green.
Yeah. Right. Thank you all very much indeed for tuning in. Until next week, from the JFDI podcast, it's good night from myself, and
good night, Slange.
Cheers.